What's up, guys? Kurt Larson here, back in the Toronto Sun newsroom to take your Toronto FC, MLS, Canadian men's national team questions for another week, heading into decision day on Sunday in Atlanta. Let's get right to them. A question that a lot of you have been asking me of late. This one from Andrew1501 on Twitter says or asks, are there any plans for BMO Field to have extra seats during the playoffs? I finally got an answer on this one. It looks like the configuration for these playoffs, MLS Cup, it's not going to be like last year when there were 5,000 extra seats in the South End. I'm told there's going to be a few extra seats in the North End, probably a temporary stand of around 1,000. They're going to use the South Concourse to add a few suites, which will add another 300 fans. But no plans right now, and probably not this season, to extend the South End by 5,000 seats, which we saw at last year's MLS Cup. Next up from Adamo on Twitter, what do you think TFC's lineup will look like in Atlanta? He's kind of concerned about the turf. Will Altidore and Giovinco start because they've kind of been injury prone in the past? Everything I've been told and what I think is going to happen is they're going to go and play this game like it's just any other game, especially when you look at last week against Montreal. The team struggled, probably could have lost that game. They haven't really been themselves for really a month now, in my opinion. You look at the back line, Chris Mavinga giving away balls, maybe Eric Zavaleta and Drew Moore not looking as steady as they've been throughout the season, and then questions around Alex Bono in goal, who, as he's spilled a lot of crosses and come out and hasn't looked sure about himself. Then you look up front, Sebastian Giovinco looks a bit snake-bitten. Can they get him on track? I think they're going to go down to Atlanta, try and get the record for most points in a single season while really trying to find some continuity going into these playoffs. They have 10 or 11 days off between Sunday and their first playoff game, so plenty of time to recover. Next up, Anto7. Who takes the next penalty kick? Of course, this is a question that relates back to Giovinco missing 2 penalties against Montreal, both of them hitting the post. When you look at the numbers, which I looked at this week, Giovinco is 1 for 4 this season on penalties. Altidore, I believe, is 3 for 4, and Victor Vasquez is 3 for 3. So when you just look at the numbers, you'd have to say Victor Vasquez or Josie Altidore right now are your safe bets to take penalties. That said, Sebastian Giovinco had a run of, I think, 9 straight in 2015 and 2016. Maybe unlucky to hit the post, but if you're going with one penalty kick taker right now, you have to go with Victor Vasquez. This question from Peter Barna Zuzic on Twitter. Now that you're a Canadian citizen, will you take more interest in the Canadian men's national team over the U.S. men's national team? Funny question. I don't really know where it's coming from, seeing as I've kind of traveled all over the world to cover the Canadian men's national team, to Honduras, El Salvador, Mexico, Panama. You name it, I've been at all the World Cup qualifiers, and you know, let's admit, when Canada does well in men's soccer, it's good for everybody in the industry, it's good for fans. So I think I give enough attention to the Canadian men's national team as it is right now. I'll take another question from Peter. Do you think this Atlanta game on Sunday is a preview of the Eastern Conference Finals? I actually don't. While I've been high on Atlanta all year, probably the most dangerous attacking 4 in the league with Martinez and Villalba and Almiron if he's healthy. I actually like how the New York Red Bulls are setting up right now. Of course, we don't really know what the playoff picture is going to look like until after this weekend. But when you look at what the New York Red Bulls might be able to do this weekend, I think they're in good shape. They're in the 6th spot. They know they're not going anywhere. They go to D.C. on decision day. And really don't have to play anybody, knowing that they're locked into the number 6 spot. So they're going to go somewhere 3 or 4 days later, probably way more fresh than Columbus, Chicago, Atlanta, or even New York City, and probably have a good advantage to win that game on the road. You know, if they get through that, New York Red Bulls always play TFC really well. TFC always struggles at Red Bull Arena. When Red Bulls came here a few weeks ago, I thought they dominated large portions of that game. So I think if I'm looking at an Eastern Conference final right now, I might like TFC and Red Bulls, assuming the playoff picture works out. Let's see here. Travis Martin on Twitter. Do you think the bye week that TFC is going to have entering the playoffs is much of an advantage for TFC? I do, because it's one of the reasons they're able to go on the road this weekend and really play a full roster and try and get back to the form we saw them in during the summer. 10, 11 days off, like I mentioned. They're going to have plenty of time to recover. It's going to be good for them to go down to Atlanta and actually play in that massive stadium in front of 70,000 fans in case they have to go back there. People always talk about how you don't want to kind of lose your momentum entering the playoffs. I think after the 34-game season, 8 months, it's okay to have a few extra days off. And I think if you asked any coach in the league and any team in the league, they'd prefer to be sitting out that first week of the playoffs, because anything can happen in this league, as you know. Colin Freebury, a few more. Colin Freebury on Twitter. Do you give Clint Irwin a start in Atlanta because of, kind of Bono's, how his form has been? The answer is no. I asked Greg Vanney in New England a few weeks ago, put him on the spot and said, who's your #1 goalkeeper moving forward? In the past, he's kind of said, we're going to see who's in the best form. We're going to talk amongst coaches, ask goalkeeper coach John Conway what he thinks. But this time in New England, after that game, he came out and said that Alex Bono's our #1. So I think at this point, if you pull Bono, unless he has an absolutely horrific game in Atlanta, if you pull him at this point, you're going to shatter his confidence. You're not going to know what you have going into the playoffs. I think you leave everything as it is. Bono's been good throughout the season. He's had a few weeks and a few shaky moments that he'd probably himself would admit he could have been better. But going into the playoffs, you want everybody to be confident. You have to stick with Alex Bono. Finally, Nathan G. Thoughts on the U.S. men's national team's friendly versus Portugal, and whether or not it'll impact any TFC players. The U.S. will go to Portugal, I believe, on November 14th for an international friendly. I don't expect any of TFC players to be called up, be it Bradley or Altidore or Justin Morrow. But it leads me to maybe kind of flip the question here and say which players could potentially be called up in the future moving forward. It's about time for Marky Delgado to get a look. He's been in TFC's midfield all year, 22 years old. He's a young player, which is exactly what the U.S. says it's looking for right now after they exited the World Cup qualifying in really horrendous fashion in Trinidad. And Marky Delgado, he's played with Bradley, he's played with Vasquez, he fits into that midfield well. Great soccer mind. I don't think there's any reason right now why Marky Delgado shouldn't be considered alongside the best young midfielders in Major League Soccer. That's it for today. I'll see you guys in Atlanta. For those of you who are traveling, maybe I'll do a Q&A down there when I get there. Otherwise, looking forward to decision day. We'll see you next time.